The top 20 Kino of 2021, or in peasant terms, films. Yeah, 2021 was a big jump up from 2020 films-wise. We got a lot of good stuff this year, and obviously you can still see the effect of the pandemic with a lot of things being moved or movies even being scared to release. But overall, I think we had a pretty good year for movies. A couple movies I didn't see that definitely would have made the list are The Last Duel, Nightmare Alley, Lamb, Belfast, and Summer of Souls. And to fill in their places, I just replaced it with superhero movies. So yeah, even more of those. Got them. And a quick few movies who just didn't make the list. Inside, Bo Burnham's kind of mental showing of his depression, how people handled the pandemic. White Tiger was that Netflix original movie that showed all the issues with classism in India. And then we had Nobody, which was pretty much a John Wick-esque film. Genuinely, probably some of the best action of the year and a super fun watch. And with that out of the way, let's get into number 20. I don't know why that sounded a lot more seductive than it should have. Stillwater may be a little telegraphed, a bit too long, and kind of disjointed at times, but it's a great movie about accepting fate and accepting change. Matt Damon is amazing here and plays a conservative blue-collar worker from the Midwest. The movie really centers around the relationship between a French family and Matt Damon's character as he tries to prove his daughter's innocence. The dichotomy of Damon's unapologetic American demeanor and the ways of the French family is extremely interesting, and it brings up a lot of good points on just American values and the perception of America in other countries. The movie is heartwarming and dark at times, with a focus on imperfect people and a lot about the grayness of the legal system and just how people are in general. Licorice Pizza is an amazingly written and phenomenally acted movie about two people falling in love with a running theme of fearing commitment and being true to yourself. The story is simple, but what makes this movie shine is just how tight the dialogue is and how interesting seemingly mundane scenarios quickly become eccentric. The setting is also a love letter to 70s SoCal, and it definitely has a lot of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood vibes. I know this movie is one of the highest rated movies of the year, and it's at the top of a lot of people's list, but the relationship to me is just too messed up, with the movie encouraging the love between a 15-year-old boy and a 25 to 28-year-old woman. That and some poorly tasted and really outdated Asian racist jokes just really are poorly included elements that honestly could have just been excluded from this movie and would have made me enjoy this a lot more. The French Dispatch is a very weird, quirky, and stylistic movie with callbacks to a bygone era of cinema and journalism. This is a Wes Anderson movie through and through, and the visual storytelling here is just phenomenal. This is a movie that you really don't want to take your eyes off, even if you just don't completely follow what's going on. This movie is broken up into a few segments of essentially these ridiculous news stories and these journalists going for a final editorial of a paper. Each has its own super unique and entertaining characters that paint a colorful yet odd tale with definitely some underlying allegorical and commentary on the likes of the high-end art scenes and artists, idealization, legacy, and realisms of movement idols, and just an outsider's unique perspective on the constantly moving yet at times unaccepting and stale world around them. The comedy is also really well done, with a good mix of tight, witty writing, slapstick, dark comedy, and just absurdist and odd, truly bizarre humor. I'm not smart or knowledgeable enough to appreciate everything the movie was going for, but it was still such a joy and unique, refreshing experience. Great cast, great music, and just a great time overall. King Richard gives us one of the best, if not the best performance of Will Smith's career, telling the story of Venus and Serena Williams' rise into tennis stars. It focuses on their dad, Richard Williams, as he pushes his daughters and uses his unorthodox ways of training to help shape them into the people they are today. This definitely could have been a really boring and monotonous movie, but despite it being a little overlong, the movie tackles a lot of good themes on the struggle of making it big and believing in your dream fully, even if you are the one standing out in the crowd. Encanto is a cute Disney original animated movie with a great message of acceptance and understanding what the true gifts of life are. It did a really good job of representing the Colombian culture and integrating not only that into its characters, but also its setting, plot, and themes. Also, this movie has quite a few bops, and since it dropped on Disney Plus for Christmas, I've been seeing it get a lot more traction, which is great. Dune is a tricky one because this movie is very exposition heavy and feels very much like the setup for something grander. That being said, the production of this is amazing. If this doesn't get a visual design Oscar, I don't know what's wrong with the world, because this movie looks more amazing than movies that cost an extra 50 to 100 million more. It's shot amazingly and has really great performances from Timothy and Zendaya and Oscar Isaac and just Josh Brolin. It does a good job of introducing its themes somewhat subtly with its colonialism, its imperialism, its man versus nature. I just wish this could be higher because it really is just setting up a lot of things and does have a really awkward, abrupt ending. And I really think the second movie, if done well, can be just absolutely phenomenal and a sci-fi classic. But as it stands here, Dune is just a really good setup for a better movie to come. Shang-Chi is the MCU at its core. It's a funny, over-the-top comic book movie with fun, quippy characters and great set pieces. Despite being kind of formulaic, Shang-Chi is able to carve its own niche through its focus on martial arts and Eastern fantasy settings. Shang-Chi is a really well-done character who's a very exciting addition to the MCU. The powers and the large emphasis on fight choreography really make this feel like a unique corner of the larger MCU universe, and its large emphasis on Eastern versus Western mentalities creates a very compelling conflict between a traditional father and his more liberal children. Luca is just good old Pixar at its core. We get a fantasy story of these mermaid-esque people who live in a separate world to the humans. Two young characters from this underwater world form a friendship through their common interests in the human world. This movie tackles a very fundamental message of the need to accept one another, but does this with such class, while also adding some underlying LGBTQ+ undertones. Its small Italian town setting also adds some unique personality to this movie, through the environment and cultural practices we see. It's a mid-tier Pixar film and nowhere near how good Soul was last year, but as per expected, it's hard not to get emotional at a couple moments in this movie for its heartwarming scenes, and it culminates into a really sweet, family-friendly movie. A Quiet Place 2 shouldn't have worked as well as it did. A sequel to a movie that really didn't seem like it needed one, A Quiet Place 2 expands on the world of this universe by introducing us to different factions of people existing in this world, and also giving us a flashback into the start of the world as we know it. Despite not having Jim, the movie is able to use his loss as a central theme of stepping up to take a missing role, whether that be you growing up and taking the place of your parents, or aiding another group of people who may not necessarily be your direct family. It also has some decent horror elements with a mix of humans and some really coolly designed monsters creating some very tense moments. This is very obviously a middle movie of the trilogy, and despite its short runtime, I enjoyed this movie a lot more than I expected, and I'm genuinely excited for the next entry into this universe. Also, this is straight up like the closest thing we probably get to The Last of Us until the actual show, because the opening scene and the flashback is very much reminiscent of the beginning of The Last of Us. West Side Story is just a super well-crafted interpretation of the classic musical, given a bit more of a realistic, gritty, stylistic approach in comparison to the 60s film. The production values are just great, and the sets and dancing are all just so top-notch. It's a timely message and a Shakespearean story, while the romance is a little weird because it's a little too Disney-esque, like We Just Met and I Love You. I get the influence, but it also could have been given a little bit of a more realistic makeover. I also really like the Latino representation, of course, and the fact that there's no subtitles in a lot of the Spanish-speaking scenes, which is just a nice touch. It may alienate some people, but I think it gives it a more realistic approach of saying, hey, sometimes like you're not going to understand what the other person is saying, and that's part of the experience. And I just have to give it props because it's like the origin story of Irish Rico, because it's a Puerto Rican mother and a European-esque immigrant child getting together. Obviously not that dramatic, but hey. As someone with no prior knowledge of the Rent musical or its creator, Tick Tick Boom was a fully fascinating and inspiring movie. Andrew Garfield straight up is just one of my favorite actors right now, and the range he is able to show and how well he handles tough emotional scenes is just so impressive. This was a surprisingly great year for musicals for me, and this movie was not the exception, giving us some really amazing songs, some fun choreography, while also telling us an engaging story about following your dreams and the beauty of life despite the challenges we face. Alright, you know what it is. Snyder's 4-hour rendition of 2017's Justice League. Love him or hate him, Snyder is extremely divisive, but I genuinely think this is his most unifying film yet, which is ironically fits into the message of this movie. This isn't a masterpiece, but it takes a bunch of characters like Cyborg and Flash and gives them genuine story arcs that make them very interesting and compelling characters. We get so much breathing room in this movie to genuinely develop the world, its characters, and the story. and at least to me, it somehow didn't feel like it dragged at all. The breakup of the movie into chapters really helps with the pacing, and the movie really does a good job of introducing the tone of each of these chapters. As someone who is pretty invested in this world, it's just crazy to have this even be made, and I think it's an achievement in itself. And honestly, thanks to streaming, we were able to get a full 4-hour cut of this movie that really shouldn't have been possible. In the Heights is a phenomenal musical with amazing representation of Caribbean Latin culture. The production is amazing, the songs are really good, which is as expected from Lin-Manuel, and all the music has like inspiration of some merengue and salsa backgrounds, and the dancing all has a lot of cultural pride into it. You really root for these characters, and it really touches a lot on the immigrant experience. Some of the movie's a little too optimistic, and the corniness of musical definitely comes out at times, but overall this is a well-filmed movie about achieving your dreams, the power of community, and setting up the next generation. I hard disagree with critics on this one. Don't Look Up is a completely unsubtle satire of our world's lack of care for obvious threats we face, and our insistence to deny or ignore truths for the convenience of ourselves. DiCaprio and Lawrence are so good in this, just as these awkward scientists that are really trying to rally the world to fight against this comet that is coming to destroy Earth, as it pokes fun of current day media, politics, and capitalism. This is just a very real movie to me, and to hopefully a lot of others, that paints a really kind of depressing picture of where we're at now. This movie is just one that will sit with me for a long time, and its ending and the things said during it are some of my favorite lines ever. While Suicide Squad might not have the most complex story, it more than makes up for it in what 2016's Suicide Squad failed to do. Give us layered, likable characters that are the core of what Suicide Squad is. People seen as expendable who truly are not. This is very much a James Gunn film with its dark humor, grotesque violence, but also in his ability to write engaging characters that become more than they seem at the surface. The movie was also able to make use of Starro in a great way, which is fucking amazing in itself, while integrating it into another one of the main themes of control, whether that be through politics, power, blackmail, or literal mind control. It's a great movie overall, and definitely one of DC's best. Another movie that's just hard to imagine it exists. While not as cleanly done as, say, Endgame, No Way Home is the culmination of the last 20 years of the Spider-Man franchise, and it's just amazing to see on screen. And fuck dude, like, this movie makes you tear up in so many ways. They completely satisfy every itch you could have had with all the returning heroes and villains, while letting Tom Holland's Spidey still shine and complete his essentially origin arc in such a satisfactory way. It definitely teeters on being too fanservicey at times. There's definitely some sloppy writing and some hand-waving at times, but the fact that they nailed the core heart of the movie and were able to just leave us so satisfied while juggling so many elements is just insane and an achievement. From the same people that brought us Spider-Verse, Mitchells vs. the Machines is such a fun, heartwarming movie about family that throws us into an AI uprising world centered around this whimsical family. I really feel like this movie got overlooked this year because it has such a good message, well-written characters, and it's just a great aesthetic from its awesome animation, hilarious writing, and interesting world. It's very much worth a watch, especially with your family, and I really hope this one wins the animation category at the upcoming Oscars. The Green Knight is one of those indie movies that's just really hard to recommend, but it's such an unique, amazing, surreal experience. The cinematography and music in this movie is amazing. The movie touches on a lot of messages on the cyclical existence of life and death, the false protector learning to be brave, trying to find honor. The movie just has a lot of deep metaphors and requires a lot of rewatching and analysis to really kind of understand what it all is saying. And while it is slow at times, it's very atmospheric and just makes you feel uneasy the whole movie. It's just one of those movies that it's really hard to forget, and it's hard to describe all the things it goes for, because this movie in its own deserves a whole video of just analysis, and there's so much you can probably pull from this, and you find more and more on rewatches. It's just a really surreal, unique experience that is definitely worth watching. Minari is a true American immigrant story filled with the hard realities of achieving your dream, adjusting to a new lifestyle, and just fitting in, but one that really shows the resilience and hope of so many people like them. The movie is about a Korean American family starting a farm, and I'm really happy this movie focused on the family's internal struggles and money rather than the town around them, which made this movie feel very unique and different from other movies that tackle a lot of the American immigration story. Like I've said many times, A24 is one of my favorite studios making films, and this movie is no exception. This movie is just really inspiring, beautiful, well told, and it's just really cool to see stories like this put onto screen, to really give a unique perspective of the different kinds of Americans who are living in this country and the different backgrounds they may come from, but just the unifying dreams and hopes that we all have. Pig is by far my favorite movie of this year. I went into this one completely blind and I was just blown away by it. The movie kind of introduces it in a way where it makes you think this is going to be some John Wick-esque movie about Nicolas Cage getting his pig back, but it's just not that at all, and I'm so glad it wasn't. This movie is very much about moving on after loss. This movie just has an amazing performance from Wolf and Cage and everyone. The characters are so good with a lot of depth, and there's so much tension that never results in violence, which is so refreshing. It's just good writing. It's also really well filmed with some really great obscured kind of shots that keep you entertained. On top of that, it's just really the slow unveiling of these characters and background about them that really makes this movie so meaningful and moving. You are completely invested in the journey of Nicolas Cage's character, and you want to learn more and more about him, and then ultimately reach a climax that just is extremely heavy, but very cathartic in a way that lets you understand the realities of the world around us. Highly, highly, highly recommend this movie that subverts expectations and came out becoming one of my favorite movies. Straight up, after I saw this movie, I just kind of walked over to the balcony of the theater and just like stared into the city and like reflected for a solid like 5 minutes. It's just a really well done film, and I really hope this movie gets some kind of buzz at the Oscars or something and more people get to experience it. So apologies for my formal attire. This is just what I was wearing when recording this, and I don't feel like changing right before. Also trying a new thing with my hair. Probably will never stick and won't keep this, but hey. 2021 just was a really good year for movies for me. I went to the theaters a lot, and it was something I really missed in 2020, and we've come a long way from me putting Borat 2 as my best movie of 2020, which in retrospect probably wasn't the best move, but regardless, I saw a lot this year, and it was a lot of fun to make this list and kind of just be going back and forth with like what's gonna win out. And yeah, so a lot more to come, hopefully going into some great momentum into 2022. As usual, I appreciate the viewership. It means a lot. It means a lot to Bobo. He is my cat, and he is staring out a window right now. But thanks. It honestly means a lot, and hopefully 2022 is great and a better year for everyone. And hopefully, you stick around and see some more stuff of what I'm going to bring around. So take it easy. A top 20 Kino of 2022 or 2021. Yeah, we out here.